Hey everyone, I'm Ali with the Rediscovery Centre and welcome to this virtual workshop where we will explore exactly what climate change is, what causes it, how it affects our planet, and most importantly, what we can all do together to try and solve this issue. But before we get into that, a little bit about me. As I said, my name is Ali and I work for the Rediscovery Centre based in Ballymun, County Dublin, which is the National Centre for the Circular Economy. At the Rediscovery Centre, we are really passionate about the environment. We want to teach other people how to live their own lives the same way. We focus a lot on waste, trying to stop things being thrown out by showing you how you can use your waste to create some really cool things. Now, we take in things like furniture, fabrics, bikes, and paint, and we'll repair and upcycle them so that they can be used by somebody else. Like these chairs here. When they came into us, they were broken and a little bit grubby looking, but we took them apart, cleaned them up, spruced them up a bit, and I think you'll agree, they're looking pretty good. The guitars here were also made from broken furniture. Can anyone guess what they used to be? Wardrobes, a really cool use of materials which otherwise would have ended up in landfill. We work with recycling centres all across the country, and we take in bikes that people have gotten rid of. We take them back to our workshops, clean them up, take them apart, and then rebuild them, making any repairs that need to be made. The only new parts we will put on the bike is brakes for safety. Otherwise, all of the parts are recycled from other old bikes. With our fashion department, we take in unwanted textiles and clothes, and we'll repair and redesign them so that they can be reused. Sometimes we work on some pretty funky projects like this raincoat here that's been made from IKEA shopping bags. And another huge thing we do at the Rediscovery Centre is education, and that is my job. Now, normally we go around to schools and libraries, but we also do virtual workshops, all to do with the environment, as well as science, engineering, and maths. And today, we're going to focus on climate change. First of all, what do you think climate change is? Maybe you could pause the video here and write a few key words on the board or on a piece of paper. You could repeat this exercise in future to see exactly what you have learned from doing this workshop. Now, first we need to understand what climate is. We've all heard of weather before. Can anyone give examples of different kinds of weather? Rain, sun, wind, snow. The weather outside can change from day to day. It can be sunny one day and rainy the next. And the weather can also be different in different places. It could be sunny here and lashing rain just one town over. Climate, however, is a little different. Climate is the kind of weather a place usually experiences, and different places have different climates. For example, the climate in Ireland is very different to the climate in the desert. Some parts of the world have snow all year round, while other places are so warm that you would never, ever have to wear a jacket. Now, climate change is when these long-term weather patterns change over time. This can be changes in things like temperature or the amount of rainfall. And the Earth's temperature swings back and forth between colder stages with ice and snow and warmer stages, which look kind of like the world we know today. This is what we call natural climate change. It happens really slowly over long periods of time. And it's been happening ever since the world began. And this is why ice ages happen. The last ice age began about 2.5 million years ago. So our climate does naturally change, but over thousands and thousands of years. What we're going to be learning about today is something a bit different, called the climate crisis. Now, on planet Earth, we're really lucky to be protected by a layer of gases called our atmosphere. It's made up of gases like nitrogen, oxygen, which we breathe in, carbon dioxide, which we breathe out, and lots of other gases too. Our atmosphere is really important because it traps some of the sun's heat in. Without it, we'd freeze to death. If we had no gases protecting us, the average temperature on Earth would be minus 18 degrees Celsius. The atmosphere acts like a blanket, trapping that heat inside. Over long periods of time, the amounts of these gases in our atmosphere change, and that's what causes those ice ages we looked at. But when we talk about the climate crisis, We're talking about the way we humans live and how that is releasing more and more of those greenhouse gases into the atmosphere. Can anyone guess why they're called greenhouse gases? Has anyone ever stood in a greenhouse before? Is it warm or cold in there? When we release more greenhouse gases, the layer gets thicker. It's like we've put a second blanket around the planet, trapping more and more heat inside. Okay, so before we go any further, I want to test what you already know about the climate crisis. It's time for an activity. Here I've got 10 different statements, and all you have to do is decide which ones are true and which ones are false. You can work alone or in groups on this one, but pause the video here and have a go at seeing if you can separate fact from fiction. Bonus points if you can figure out why the false statements are false. All finished up? Okay, let's take a look. Did you get them all right? Pause the video again here and check out your answers. Slight changes in climate patterns over time is natural. However, the climate crisis that we are experiencing has been caused by human behavior, like burning fossil fuels for energy. So number one is false. Energy consumption is responsible for up to 73% of global greenhouse gas emissions. Pretty scary. Number three, climate change is a result of the greenhouse effect. Greenhouse gases act like a blanket around the Earth, causing temperatures to rise. Number four, the temperature of Earth's surface has actually risen by 1.18 degrees Celsius, and the ocean has risen by 0.6. For number five, ice cores from glacial mountains all over the world and satellite images of the atmosphere from space are two ways that scientists have been able to see extreme changes in those greenhouse gas levels. Humans have increased the concentration of CO2 by 48% in the last 200 years. Carbon dioxide is the most abundant greenhouse gas in our atmosphere. Methane comes from the breakdown of natural materials like animal and food waste. So the agriculture industry and landfills are two of its major emitters. Plants pull CO2 out of the atmosphere for photosynthesis. So when we cut down trees, the world loses its carbon sinks. Large forests like the Amazon help to keep our carbon dioxide levels in check. And finally, for number 10, keeping Earth's surface temperature from rising above 2 degrees Celsius will prevent many of the greatest effects of the climate crisis. How'd you get on with that one? Pretty tricky, but I bet you managed it just fine. So next, we're going to look at exactly where those greenhouse gases come from. And they can come from lots of different places, from farms, from our homes, from cars, from planes and trains, from factories, and even from the rubbish that we just throw away. Can anyone say where most of the greenhouse gas emissions in Ireland came from in 2019? Agriculture, so from our farms. What was next? Transport, so the way we get around and the way we move things from one place to another. And from the graph here, we can see that CO2 levels in our atmosphere have naturally changed over time. That's carbon dioxide. Can anyone guess what happens when the levels are low? Remember, greenhouse gases trap heat in. These dips would match up when our planet was covered in ice during the ice ages of the past. But we can also see from the graph that since the 1900s, in the last 100 years or so, carbon dioxide levels have just kept going up and up and up. This is because the way that we live has changed over the past 100 years. Since then, we've changed the way we get around. A long time ago, people used to walk or use horses to get from one place to another. Now we use cars, planes, ships, even rockets. These vehicles use fossil fuels like petrol and diesel to power their engine. And when we burn fossil fuels, they release greenhouse gases like carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. And we've also expanded to live in new places. We've cut down huge amounts of trees to make space for humans to live in. And we collect wood to use for building things. Can anyone remember why trees are important? They take in carbon dioxide from the air and release oxygen for us to breathe. If we cut them all down, there's less carbon dioxide being taken from the air, so more of it goes into our atmosphere. We also make lots and lots of things in factories, and to power those factories needs lots of energy, and most of the time this energy comes from fossil fuels. We also use fossil fuels to heat our homes. And the foods that we eat also release greenhouse gases. Cows burp a lot. And when they burp, they release methane, which is another greenhouse gas. And our rubbish also releases methane. When we send rubbish to the landfill or dump, it slowly breaks down over time. As this happens, methane gas is made, which makes its way into our atmosphere. Now, let's explore the effects that climate change is having on our planet. Here we've got a picture with lots of blank squares. What I want you to try and do is fill in the blanks with changes that are happening to our world because of climate change. Work in teams for this, and don't worry if you don't get them all. Some are trickier than others. Pause the video here and have a go at filling in as many as you can. Got them all filled in? Great. Let's take a look at the answers together. So climate change and rising temperatures will cause sea ice and ice sheets to melt. As well as that, our seas will get hotter. This can have really bad effects on coral reefs, which will bleach and die in warmer conditions. Our coral reefs are very important habitats and food sources for lots of animals in our seas and oceans. If these are damaged, that can cause changes in ocean food webs. Food webs can also be changed when our ocean currents change. That will affect how creatures and minerals move through the water. And as all of that ice continues to melt, that will change the salt levels in our seas. As more and more fresh water flows into our oceans, our seas will become less salty overall. Marine creatures need the water to be salty enough for their body systems to work correctly. So this can have really big effects. And as the ice melts, water levels will rise. This can cause flooding in coastal areas and by rivers. Climate change will also change weather patterns, causing more storms, changes in rainfall and snow patterns. Temperatures will rise as CO2 levels in our atmosphere climb, and we'll experience more heat waves. The higher temperatures will cause glaciers to shrink and melt, and it'll mean that snow on mountaintops will melt earlier in the year. It'll affect our plants too, changing when they grow, which can affect how our food supplies will come to us. So as you can see, it's not just global temperatures that will change. Climate change will have an effect on pretty much every part of our lives. Now, as good scientists, we have to make sure that the information that we're looking at is correct. So scientists will never do an experiment just once. The experiment should be done over and over again, and ideally by lots of different people. We can see from the graph here that 4 different studies were done on how our planet's temperature has changed over time. What do you notice about the 4 colored lines? Do they all match up pretty well? We can see really clearly that the temperature of our planet has increased over the last 100 years. And this change in temperature means that ice is melting. The warmer it is, the faster ice will melt. These 2 pictures were taken 85 years apart. You're looking at the same mountains at the same time of year. Can anyone describe the difference? Certainly is a very different landscape. And when all of that ice at the polar ice caps and in glaciers melts, where does it go? It flows into our rivers and oceans, meaning more and more water is ending up in the waters that surround countries. 8 of the top 10 largest cities in the world are by the coast. What do you think could happen to these cities if water levels keep rising? What will happen to the people that live there? To their homes? What about to all of the animals that live on small islands in the middle of the ocean? Changing global temperatures can also change weather patterns. We can see from the graph here that we're getting more and more extreme weather events every year. Things like floods, storms, droughts, and they're also getting stronger and more severe. Some of you might remember the Beast from the East in 2018, where we had huge amounts of snow, which is quite unusual for Ireland. Or you might remember some other storms, really high winds and lots of rain. Different parts of the world will experience different kinds of extreme weather, like floods, storms, hurricanes, or forest fires. You guys could pause the video here and have a discussion on how these extreme weather events could affect people or animals. As well as being affected by storms, climate change can affect animals in lots of different ways. When green sea turtles lay their eggs on beaches, the temperature those eggs are laid at will decide whether the baby will be a boy or a girl. Warmer temperatures will mean more female turtles hatching out. As the world gets warmer, we will have more and more female sea turtles and fewer males, which can affect their population. Other animals are having their habitats or the places they live destroyed by climate change, like polar bears, for example, because of the sea ice and glaciers melting, or other creatures who live on small islands, which end up being completely underwater because of rising sea levels. Does anyone know what giant pandas like to eat? Bamboo. Bamboo likes to grow in very specific conditions. It's a bit like Goldilocks. It doesn't like it too hot or too cold. Now that the earth is getting warmer, bamboo isn't growing as well as it used to, meaning there's not as much food available for pandas to eat. And some animals are more likely to get eaten because of climate change. The snowshoe hare in North America is brown in summer, but turns bright white in winter to blend in with the snow. But because of higher temperatures, there is no snow, and these white hairs stick out like a sore thumb, meaning they're more likely to be eaten by predators. Climate change is also affecting how animals behave. Animals like birds and butterflies migrate, meaning they move from one place to another at certain times of the year, like swallows leaving Ireland to spend winters in Africa. Deciding when to leave to fly somewhere else is based on temperature. As it gets warmer, animals may move north earlier in the year, but when they get there, there might not be enough food or shelter available for them. Temperature will also tell animals when to lay their eggs or have babies. If the babies are born too early in the year, there might not be food and they might starve. So what is the solution? Has anyone ever heard of climate action before? Climate action means actively doing things to cut back on the amount of greenhouse gases we're putting into the atmosphere. It means things that we at home can do, things our governments can do, and things that scientists and companies can do. Climate action is goal number 13 of the Sustainable Development Goals. Has anyone ever heard of these? These were a set of 17 goals put together by the United Nations to make sure we can all live a safer, greener, cleaner future. And everyone has to work together to achieve these goals. What do you think you can do to help the planet? Pause the video here and have a think, or have a chat in groups. Now, there are lots of very simple things we can all do today that will make a difference to our planet and how it's being affected by climate change. We can walk, cycle, and take public transport as much as possible, turning off lights and electronics when we're finished with them, using renewable energy wherever we can, reduce, reuse, recycle. Don't waste water. It takes a lot of energy to treat and clean it. Eat more veggies, eat less meat, plant a tree or two. Speak up and have your voice heard. It is your future. In your groups, decide today what you're going to do to make a difference to help the planet. It can be things you can change today, things that you're going to change within the next year, things you can do, your class can do, your family can do. Everything is going to make a difference. So make sure that in your groups, you pause the video here and you have a discussion and come up with a plan. Make a pledge today as what you're going to do to help planet Earth. I hope you enjoyed this video workshop and are a little bit clearer now as to what climate change actually is. It's been absolutely fantastic joining you for this workshop, and we hope to see you again very, very soon. See ya.